Very nice, Kevin. As we've covered quite a bit on this channel, there are a lot of crazy laws from around the world, and you might think, as I did, as Kevin did, not me, Kevin writes it, I read it, that's the format of the show, that this results in a lot of crazy lawsuits filed by world governments, but it turns out that you'd be wrong. Yeah, governments, do governments file a lot of lawsuits? I mean, of course, like, you against the government. Yeah, they do. Right? Like, it's like, we have it and Regina. So it'd be like, Whistler and Regina. It would be like, me against the Queen. Or the Royals. What is it now? Is it still Regina? I don't know. It's like you always see it and R. So versus, like VR. I pitched this episode because of a very specific, and I guess the US has something similar, like against the US government or the state of so-and-so. I pitched this episode because of a very specific entry I wanted to cover, and I assumed that it would be very easy to find others. In reality, the insane laws we talk about are either rarely enforced or of so little consequence that the resulting lawsuits aren't very interesting. I would never give up on you though, dear viewers, so instead I've just had to play a little fast and loose with what qualifies as an insane lawsuit. But hey, at least it should be still full of interesting cases. United States and United States. Oh. Okay, so it's just like straight up United States. It's just like there's no specific like the government or governmental department or state. In the United States, it's common for federal cases to be named United States and defendant. What makes this, like United States versus defendant? I don't know if you do this in the US, but in the UK, we always say it's and. So like you don't say United States versus defendant, you say United States and defendant. I don't know if that's an American thing as well. I'm definitely going to get it. I'm just going to say it as and you'll know what I mean. What makes this case so bizarre, however, is that it is one of the rare instances in which the United States was suing itself. Technically, the case was named United States versus United...
Attention. If you or a loved one was diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Mesothelioma is a rare cancer linked to asbestos exposure. Call now.
Did you miss me?
Technically, the case was named United States and United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan et al. It's a hell of a mouthful. But it was still one section of the US federal government filing suit against another part of the federal government. Honestly, I'd love to have been in the room when it was decided to go ahead with this case. There's a doctrine called sovereign immunity, which has its origin in monarchical governments. Basically, the theory was that the king could do no wrong, and as such, he was immune from any legal action taken against him. Yeah, this is still true in the UK. The queen, the king, cannot be prosecuted. The United States didn't want a king, but they still did feel that the government should enjoy this sovereign immunity that made them free from legal claims. This is what Donald Trump's about to take advantage of, right? Because he's got all these cases against him, and now he's president. He's like, you can't do anything because I'm president. And I'm going to definitely pardon the shit out of myself. It's kind of fucked up.
You think?
As such, with very few exceptions, you cannot sue the United States government unless they specifically waive their immunity and consent to being sued. So for this case to have happened, that means that not only did part of the federal government want to sue another part of the government, but that the second part of the government was like, yes, bring it on, you bitches. It's like watching two siblings fight, except that there were no parents around to break them up before things went to the US Supreme Court. Once we get past the ridiculousness of the government suing itself, though, there's probably a reason. Like, people have sued themselves, right, because for insurance claims and such things, right? Because they know that they have an insurance claim against this and they somehow injured themselves and they have like insurance against being injured. So they're like, cool, I'm going to sue myself for what I did to myself. That happens. This was actually an extremely important case in US law. It began in Michigan in 1968 with Lawrence Plamondon, I hate him already, Lenny Sinclair, and John Sinclair, the founders of the White Panther Party. I know what you're probably thinking right now. I'm not thinking a lot other than what are the White Panthers? And it was the same thing that I thought when I read that name for the first time. Turns out we were both wrong. I imagine like the white... Let's just find out. The co-founder of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, was asked during a radio interview what white people could do to support the Black Panthers, and his answer to this was that they should form their own organization in solidarity with the Black Panthers. So that's exactly what those three did, and they did everything possible to make it clear that they were not a white supremacist group. Yeah, I just assumed that they were a white supremacist group. I think, like, you naturally would. And look, I get that they wanted to help and were literally doing the thing that Newton told them to do, but maybe pick a different name, yes? Maybe it wasn't so obviously like, although the past was more racist, right? So, yeah, it's just a bad name, guys. It's just a bad choice. I'm not sure how much you can realistically accomplish when you have to spend like half your organization's time explaining to the media, the public, and disappointed Klan members trying to join your party that no, seriously guys, we are not white supremacists. But apparently, they could accomplish a lot, although the timeline on this is a little fuzzy. The White Panthers were officially founded on November the 1st, 1968, but it was on September the 29th, 1 month earlier, that Plamondon and John Sinclair detonated a bomb outside the CIA's office in Ann Arbor. Holy shit. Perhaps the reason for the disparity of these dates is because the White Panthers had already been organized for months at this point, and they were just waiting for the paperwork to go through for their party to be officially recognized.
Oh, that darn paperwork. Wouldn't it be easier if it all just blew away?
Wait, like, they're a political party or what? Oh right, the bombing. Don't worry, Simon, nobody was hurt. It was just a little damage to federal property. Plamondon fled to Algeria for a bit before secretly re-entering the country and hiding out in a safe house a year later. By that point, Sinclair was already serving a 9.5-year prison sentence for offering to joint to 2 undercover police officers. No fucking way. Oh my god, guys. Now America's like fucking legal. Legalize that shit. Which is the right move. 9.5 years is like, yeah, bro, what a puff. And they're undercover. Isn't that entrapment or some shit? You know, a totally reasonable jail sentence from the self-proclaimed greatest country in the world. Plamondon was then arrested during a routine and definitely random traffic stop. He was then convicted and remained in prison while Sinclair was released on bail pending his appeals. This release came just 2 days after a Free John benefit concert featuring performances by Stevie Wonder, Bob Seger, and most importantly, Simon's musical hero Yoko Ono.
It's enough of that. It's enough of that. Come on.
Let's be real, they probably just let him out of prison so that she'd stop singing. Anyway, during discovery in Plamondon's trial, the defense requested disclosure of all electronic surveillance of the defendant. Nixon's Attorney General John Mitchell countered this request with, "But I don't want to." Mitchell said that he authorized wiretaps under the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, which gave him the authority for warrantless wiretaps and prevented him from needing to disclose any of the surveillance that had been obtained. Judge Damon Keith of the U.S. District Court ruled that Mitchell was a dumbass and that this was a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. I don't know what the Fourth Amendment is. So he ordered that all of the illegally obtained surveillance be handed over to the defense. Mitchell again countered with, "I don't want to." And so the federal government sued the federal courts over Keith's decision, hoping that perhaps a different judge would be more sympathetic to their desire to trample on the constitutional rights of Americans. The Court of Appeals upheld Keith's decision, and the Supreme Court unanimously upheld it as well. Plamondon's conviction was overturned, and the case against Sinclair was ruined. Though on about the bombing anyway. He had still been caught red-handed offering a police officer a doobie, an absolutely unforgivable offense. Oh my god. The case of United States and United States District Court, also known as the Keith case in honor of the district court judge, was a landmark Supreme Court ruling. It defended the Fourth Amendment and solidified that authorities could not use electronically...
In your own time, but quite quickly.
Could not electronically surveil someone without a court-issued warrant based on probable cause, even in suspected cases of domestic terrorism. And then in 2001, the federal government changed their mind and passed the Patriot Act. Yes, I'm like, wait, I'm pretty sure they can do that. Thank you, Patriot Act. Which, as fucked up as it is a wonderfully named piece of legislation. South Korea and Lee Jae-yong. Ever since the Nixon-Watergate scandal, it's been tradition for all scandals, political or otherwise, to end with the suffix gate. There was Watergate, Nannygate, Monica-gate, Gamergate, Pizzagate, Deflategate, and many more. But there's one other that you might not be familiar with. I mean, Simon undoubtedly has no idea what Deflategate... Oh, come on, Kevin! I know what this was about. This was about the football players, the American football players. For some reason, they were deflating the ball a little bit so that when the opponent kicked it or something, it wouldn't go as far or some shit like that. I know what that is, Kevin. I'm in tune with popular culture and sports. I love sports. Not like any specific sport, but just like the idea of sports. But this scandal from 2016 will likely be new to all of you. Park Gyung-hae Choi Soon Sil Gate. Oh my god, I'm sorry about that. We're not going to get into the entire political scandal, but a lot of it centered around the unusual, unprecedented, and sometimes unlawful access that Choi Soon-sil, the daughter of a prominent cult leader, had to South Korea's president Park Geun-hye. Not only was Choi given access to classified information, but she was believed to have influence over every decision that Park made. This was a big thing. I remember this. That was the crux of the scandal. So you may now be asking yourself how Lee Jae-yong fits into all of this. I would be asking myself that, Kevin, if I hadn't got confused with all the names and forgetting who this was. You may also be asking yourself who Lee Jae-yong even is. Okay, thank God. Lee is now the executive chairman of Samsung, although at this time he was the vice president and son of the then chairman of the company. In 2015, the South Korean government authorized a merger between Samsung and Cheil Industries. It is believed that the merger stock was deliberately undervalued in a move that would transfer the company's wealth to Lee at the expense of the shareholders. All of this was accomplished thanks to considerable pressure exerted by Park and her underlings, which raised a lot of eyebrows. Ah, yes. When you're a big enough business that you can literally influence the political leaders to make things go a little smoother for you. God damn.
Jealous?
I'd like to have a business that big where it's just like, no, I don't like how this is. Change it. Why was the president so intent on pushing through this merger, especially in a way that would specifically benefit Lee at the expense of other investors into the companies? I don't know yet, but it is worth looking into, isn't it? After a little investigation, it was discovered that the reason Park was so invested in this merger was the $36 million in bribes that Lee had paid to Park and Choi. Fuck me. I mean, yeah, if you're going to bribe the leader of a country, it's not going to be cheap. The lawsuit against Lee was one of many dominoes that fell in this scandal, but the end result was that the South Korean president was impeached by a unanimous vote. After being removed from office, Park was arrested on charges of bribery, influence peddling, abuse of power, coercion, and leaking of government secrets. She was sentenced to 24 years in prison. God damn! This sentence was appealed by prosecutors, and a new sentence of 25 years and 18. The prosecutors got her 24 years in prison, and they were like, no, we can do better. We can do better. Let's appeal. And a new sentence of 25 years and an $18 million fine against Park was issued instead. Though she did spend a few years in prison, she was ultimately pardoned at the end of 2021. What the fuck? As for Lee, he only served 18 months in prison for his crimes. While the lawsuit was obviously reasonable, what with the illegal activity and all, it's still insane that a lawsuit against a corrupt businessman would result in the president being removed from office. I mean, well, no, not when it's like this. It just seems like completely correct. The only non-correct part is the pardon. That should seem especially insane to Americans, since here lawsuits against corrupt businessmen are seen as a way to get a president into office.
Oh, I made myself sad.
Very nice, Kevin. Mexico and Smith & Wesson.
Yo-ho, Mexico! Lots in the sun where the cactus grow. Tequila and a donkey show. Mexico!
Ever since World War II, Mexico has been one of the United States' closest allies, both geographically and diplomatically. Of course, that's not the impression you would get by listening to half of America's population, including half of our politicians. Relations between our nations can be tense, especially when it comes to discussing immigration across our shared border. The perception of many Americans is that Mexico is a violent, lawless wasteland ruled by the drug cartels. They are seen as an entire nation of criminals. Holy shit. Invading the US with all of their drug dealers, murderers, and other ne'er-do-wells. Isn't the problem, like, with the border? It's not necessarily Mexicans who are illegally immigrating, right? It's people who are traveling from countries where worse shit is going down through Mexico and into the US. Right? I thought that was the primary problem. People think that Mexicans are so dangerous that Donald Trump was able to successfully win his first term as president in no small part thanks to his promises to build a wall to keep the Mexicans from invading the United States, and also by promising to make Mexico pay for it. Obviously, that was an incredibly stupid plan that didn't work, because this isn't the 3rd century BC, but the point is that there is a popular belief among Americans that Mexico is the source of the majority of violence and lawlessness in the United States. It turns out, Mexico disagrees. In 2021, the Mexican government shocked the United States by filing a $10 billion lawsuit against 7 US-run gun manufacturers. 6 of the manufacturers were later dropped from the suit, so Mexico was only going after Smith & Wesson, though I believe others like Glock, Colt, and Beretta have been added back to the lawsuit. I'm going to oversimplify things here for the sake of time, but basically, Mexico is claiming that these companies knowingly and deliberately market and sell guns to American criminals who will traffic them to Mexico. About 500,000 guns enter Mexico from the United States each year, and these guns fuel
I'm having a stroke up here.
and these guns fuel violence from the drug cartels. Of course, the typical American answer is that the drug cartels are made up of criminals, so they're going to get guns illegally anyway. Yeah, but that's no reason not to stop trying. It's like, oh, people are going to murder people anyway, so we might as well just, let murder happen with fucking stupid arguments. It's the same logic they'll use to deny any attempts at the most basic common sense gun law reform.
Unless you can get rid of 100% of crime, it's not worth doing at all.
And sure, on a very superficial level, the argument makes sense. If criminals want guns, they will obtain guns illegally. But where exactly would they get those guns? Although gun ownership is legal in Mexico, there is only one gun store in the entire fucking country. And that store is located on a heavily guarded military base, and applying to purchase a firearm is a process that takes months. As it should be! Am I against gun ownership? No, I think it's fine if you want to own guns. Should it be complicated and difficult to get a gun? Yes! 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 We should really make sure people are okay before they get guns. Jesus Christ. Without US arms manufacturers sending a flood of illegal firearms across the border, it would be much more difficult for the cartels to arm themselves. Originally, when the lawsuit was filed in 2021, it was dismissed by a US district court pursuant to the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act of 2005. The law basically says that arms manufacturers and dealers can't be held liable for any crimes committed with the weapons that they make and sell. Again, this makes surface-level sense. If I go to Walmart and buy rat poison and use it to kill someone, it is ridiculous to think that Walmart or the poison manufacturer would be held in any way liable. However, it's argued that the 2005 law gives way too much protection to these entities, even when they are knowingly selling guns to people who intend to use them for crimes. That's where it gets weird. That's the basics of it anyway, and any more discussion about that law would be a massive boondoggle, so let's just move on. Okay. After the district court denied Mexico's lawsuit, it was appealed to the Supreme Court. Mexico argued that the 2005 law only protects the companies from domestic lawsuits, and so their case should still be heard. In October of 2024, the Supreme Court agreed to rule on this appeal, though at the time of writing, no decision has been made yet. Let me guess, the Supreme Court's going to be like, yeah, also applies to international ones. Sorry we didn't say that the first time. We should have. We didn't think Mexico would do this. But perhaps the weirdest part of all of this is that the gun manufacturers wanted the Supreme Court to take the case, and they are lobbying in favor of having themselves be taken to court by the Mexican government. Yeah, because they know what the Supreme Court's going to say, and they just want this cleared up so that they can still fucking continue selling guns. It's not that shocking, is it? According to the gun manufacturers, Mexico, who understandably hates the gun laws in the United States, is trying to use the civil lawsuit as a backdoor method to create gun regulations in the US that Congress would never pass on their own. So in essence, the country that America blames all of its violent crime on is suing US companies for creating violent crime in their country in an attempt to create more restrictive gun laws in the US. Will any of this actually work? Probably not, but it's still a bizarre situation we find ourselves in. Yeah, I don't know, this is the first I've ever heard of that, but the chances of the Supreme Court being like, yeah, guilty, it's just fucking zero, isn't it? Russia and Google. And finally, we get to the entire reason I pitched this episode in the first place. Oh my god, this is the crazy fine against Google from Russia, isn't it?
Spoilers.
They fined Google more than the world's GDP. And Google be like, yeah, that sounds like something I'm definitely going to pay. As many of you may be aware, Russia recently made headlines because they had issued a fine to Google in the amount of $infinity billion plus one. And while that wasn't the actual fine, it may as well have been, because the real number is equally ludicrous. Russian courts issued a fine to Google in the amount of 2 undecillion rubles, or about $20 decillion, which, if nothing else, at least taught me what the currency conversion rate is between the ruble and the US dollar. For those of you who are unaware of what these insane numbers actually mean, a decillion is a 1 followed by 33 zeros, and a undecillion is a 1 followed by 36 zeros. Normally, this is the part where I'd say, to give you some context, and then try to explain the number by way of some easily understandable comparison. But how the fuck am I supposed to do that with numbers that the human mind can't possibly comprehend? Here's the best I can come up with. I want you to take all of the money in the entire world, every dollar, ruble, yen, peso, and whatever else. Not just the physical cash, but all of the digital cash in everybody's bank accounts as well. Don't do that. I like my digital cash. While we're at it, let's throw in all of the gold, silver, and jewels in the world as well. Literally every bit of currency and highly liquid assets. Okay, now do that again. And by again, I mean another trillion times. And then once that's done, do the whole thing another 100 billion times. I don't mean add up all the money in the world another 100 billion times. I mean add it up a trillion times another 100 billion times. See, it's already getting confusing. I'm so confused. It's beyond imaginable. It's a beyond imaginably large amount. It's already getting confusing. When I said beyond higher than the world's GDP, that was a fucking massive underestimation. These fines are getting so large that we're soon going to have to start comparing them to the number of atoms in the solar system, galaxy, and eventually the universe. So where the hell did Russia get such a ridiculous number from? It's actually a little quirk of the Russian legal system known as being completely unfucking reasonable. It began in 2020 when Google began blocking Russian-owned propaganda accounts on YouTube. More accounts were blocked in 2020 following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but at that point, the additional fines didn't really matter. For each of the state-sponsored propaganda accounts that Google blocked, they were given 9 months to reinstate the accounts, and if the accounts remained banned in those 9 months, Google would be issued a modest fine of 100,000 rubles per day, or about $1,000. Even then, Google just be like, no, what the f*** are you gonna do? Pretty sure that I'm not gonna get, that no one from Google's gonna get fucking extradited to Russia for a civil crime. It's ridiculous. And if the fines kept growing in a linear fashion like that, they would be meaningless to Google. That's only $365,000 per year, and only if they ever bothered to pay it. However, it was also stated that the fines would double every week, with no limit on the size. Now that exponential growth is involved, it's easy to see how the number got out of hand so quickly, and the 20 decillion figure that was announced by the Kremlin at the end of October, so at the time of writing, it should now be up to 80 decillion. Depending on where you're watching this, Google may now owe Russia more rubles than there are different ways to shuffle a deck of playing cards, which it sounds not big, but is unbelievably big.
That's what she said.
For Google's part, however, they don't really give a fuck. Their local subsidiary in Russia was declared bankrupt in 2022, so Russia doesn't actually have any way to enforce these ridiculous penalties. When pressed for answers by media outlets, even the Kremlin admitted that the number was a symbolic gesture. But what does it symbolize, you ask? Probably that Russia is in desperate need of radical new leadership. Again, though, Google is wholly unconcerned with this matter. In their third quarter earnings report, they wrote, "We have ongoing legal matters relating to Russia. For example, civil judgments that include compounding penalties that have been imposed upon us in connection with disputes regarding the termination of accounts, including those of sanctioned parties. We do not believe these ongoing legal matters will have a material adverse effect." In other words, we don't give a fuck, and neither should you. For any of you who don't speak corporate, that was Google's way of saying that Russia can emphatically go fuck themselves. Yes, please! And that's where we end today's episode. Thanks for being here. I don't want to.